But I want to start off with one of the main focuses of the first half of your book, which is Marketcraft. You define Marketcraft as the state's role in structuring markets rather than passively intervening in them. How does this framing reveal the ideological work that sustains capitalism's dominance over climate policy?
Yeah, I mean, when I first wanted to write this book, my thinking was I would explain why to approach the climate crisis at all, you had to be a communist. That everyone had to be a communist. We had to smash the connection between value and life, or else there was no way to actually get at the real impersonal problem of capital accumulation that's driving this ecological crisis. That it's not just a question of pulling carbon out of the air.
Mhm.
But the more I thought about that as a rhetorical strategy, the less it appealed to me. First, because I think it doesn't suggest that I really take the situation as seriously as I actually do. That if we're talking about a set of years, not, maybe a few decades, but not centuries, in
Mhm.
terms of dealing with this problem, we're going to have to be organizing across difference, organizing for coherence across difference with people who believe different things than us. That there are going to be people who believe a lot of different things and work according to their progressive strategies that we have to find ways to work alongside or in relation to. And to do that, we have to at least understand their strategies and take them seriously. And so Marketcraft is the strongest version I could possibly give of the sort of liberal climate solution.
Mhm.
So this is, if I take them as absolutely seriously as I possibly can. And I thought that was a good exercise for me, writing wise, rhetorically, but also intellectually, because I got to dig in and think like, okay, how do these people really think this is going to go? This isn't my philosophy, but how do they see it? And Marketcraft is the term from this academic Stephen Vogel at UC Berkeley. He's a political scientist. And the reason I like Marketcraft is because it's an anti-market fundamentalist understanding of what markets can be used for. He says like markets aren't like some ancient god that we have to appease. They're not like the truth of humanity or something. They're not what all of our policies have to appeal to. Uh, they're a tool that groups of people can use to effectuate the things that they want. And if your markets aren't working the way that you want, then you have to structure them better. And that's not how I understand markets or capitalism. But as a philosophy that undergirds some sort of liberal climate strategy, I think it's a good way to understand the market. And I think it's better than some of what we've been hearing about, abundance, or that we just have to like build, build, build,
Mhm.
and that we take the market's instructions for granted. That Marketcraft says, look, we're going to wake up in capitalism tomorrow, not metaphorically tomorrow. I don't think that's true. Right? Metaphorically tomorrow, I think we're going to wake up in a very different system. But literally tomorrow, we're going to wake up in capitalism. And we're going to go to work and we're going to have to find ways to use the things that we make tomorrow in the path to a better world, to make the better world out of what we start making tomorrow. Uh, and I understand that to a certain degree. And so in that chapter, I really explore that philosophy, which was tough for me as an anti-capitalist to do the 5 positive sections about that strategy. But I really tried my best, And there's some smart, well-meaning people who are working along those lines, whose ideas about what a national investment authority would look like. What would it look like if we had the government, democratic control over investment within our society? Well, that's a lot closer to what we think of as socialism
Mhm.
than we might imagine that a sort of Marketcraft strategy could get to. But there are intellectuals, working along those lines for precisely those ends, thinking about, well, how do we control green investment democratically as a society? And what I say in the book is that the best example by far of Marketcraft and Marketcraft strategy in the world is not the United States by a long shot, and it's not Europe by a long shot. It's the People's Republic of China,
Mhm.
like by a huge margin. The huge leaders in structuring, using markets as a tool to produce the the concrete tools that they need to achieve decarbonization, right? To build solar panels, literally, but also to plant trees, right? And this isn't happening under a command economy. It's happening under a mixed economy that uses a bunch of these sort of Marketcraft tools. So that's my defense of people who say, like, well, did you devote a third of this book to saying why liberalism is great? I say, like, well, maybe, but only insofar as saying that, like, China is way better at it than the United States.
Yeah, Malcolm, given that I've been reading your work, I feel like since Occupy Wall Street, when you were writing for the New Inquiry, that was, in reading this book, probably one of the more surprising moves you made. I didn't expect a sort of popular front take from a devout communist on how to solve the crisis. I mean, was it difficult to get around to that? You kind of explained that this was potentially not how you went into it, but you came around to the idea that you had to take these three, and you can talk about the other ones, but these three different tracks to solving the climate crisis. You had to take them all seriously, because the moment we're in, if we are going to solve this crisis in not a century, but in a couple of decades, it's going to require several different tracks, or at least the three that you outlined. Was that, I mean, that seems like almost like not just a political, but an epistemological struggle.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough to, like, think through, and it's not something I'm used to doing. And for that reason, maybe it felt worthwhile, but it was also kind of fun because I got to put myself in different people's shoes. The middle strategy, so we got Marketcraft as the first one. The middle one is public power, which is sort of a state socialism version, where if Marketcraft is about structuring the markets to do the things you need to do, public power says, let's just do it ourselves. Let's build the public power that we need, literally in publicly operated power plants, but also metaphorically in working class power, the power of the public sector, etc. And then the third strategy is communism. And I tried to be really strategic with the names of the first two strategies to try and, like, not trigger people, because I wanted people to, like, think through it really objectively and think, like, oh, you know, what is this argument? And not be like, oh, is that me or not me? I feel like a lot of times, probably not just on the left, but definitely on the left, we get a little, like, identitarian about our political positions. It's about, like, oh, is that my position, or is it not? Is it, like, is this a good argument or is it not? And we should, if that's your position, then you should be able to recognize it in good arguments, and you should be able to recognize other people's good arguments in their positions. It shouldn't be about, like, red team, blue team. Certainly not when we're thinking about, like, these kind of ideas. So I believe that to be true, certainly, but it's different from me writing these, like, sort of liberal arguments out myself. But so, yeah, in the third section, I gave up on that strategy and just called it communism, because that's what it's called.
You're like, they're going to publish this book anyway. Fuck them.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm not shy about what I believe, and I'm happy to explain it and to anyone who wants to talk about it. You know, I believe
you're not like Andres Malm, where it's like I think he had a book that during the COVID crisis was like a COVID war, communism, and the environment. It's like, okay, it's on Verso. I know who this is for.
Yeah, well, he worked. Yeah, and he's has a job in Sweden, and he's I couldn't have written this book without the work of scholars like Malm, so I definitely don't want to look down my nose at him. I'm lucky enough to be able to take some of that work and try and explain it or build on it to a more general audience, and that's a privilege that I take really seriously. And so, sadly, I feel like it was fun for me, but also a challenge to think through these different strategies. But one of my hopes was that I could get sort of the intellectual end of liberals to sort of think through these arguments with me, and to think through this book and see themselves represented and see me treat them fairly and think through what that means and what it would mean if I'm, saying this other stuff or whatever. And that sort of hasn't happened. That was like I was basing on a public sphere that has changed a lot. I think the intellectual standards for the mainstream, but even our, like, you know, liberal and left liberal intellectual folks, our friends in the mainstream, has really degraded. And I didn't think about that so much in this book, but maybe I should have, and maybe I'll think about it more in the next book. But
I
like,
mean,
yeah, people are just not thinking that much. They're not excited to think